This is a meeting of the Raleigh Conservation Commission for May 28th, 2013. This meeting of the Raleigh Conservation Commission is hereby called to order under authority of MGL Chapter 131, Section 40, the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw, and the Stormwater Management and Erosion Control Bylaw. I will now call the roll for attendance. Robert Carpenter is absent. Dave Delmonico?
Present.
Bob Garner?
Here.
Judy Key, present absent. Sam Strife?
Here.
Kurt Turner?
Here.
And Doug Hudson is absent.
Along with Dr. Carpenter.
Yeah, I start off with him.
Okay.
We do have a quorum present. If the commission has a consensus, since Chairman Watson is not here this evening, Vice Chair Kurt Turner, I believe, stands ready to serve, chairing the meeting.
I do. You have things to sign?
Yes, sir. If I may request, review and authorization with Mike Earl. And for your review is my hours sheet as can be currently displayed.
Okay, initial this or sign it?
Sign it, please. Kurt, if you could possibly put the date down there, just so it's in.
What is it?
That's the 28th.
5/28.
And also recently, I sent an email reminder to the commissioners that we have two commissioners who are up for reappointment. Sam Strife, present this evening, and Dr. Robert Carpenter, who was not present this evening. Sam has, I believe, already communicated his desire for reappointment with
Great.
the Board of Selectmen. Dr. Carpenter has told me that due to commitments on his time or whatever, he is not going to seek reappointment to the commission, but he intends to stay active or try to reactivate the Open Space Committee, and I believe also serve on the CPC. I think he represents
Yes.
the Open Space Committee.
Yeah.
So that being said, I have prepared a draft of a letter to the selectmen supporting Sam Strife's reappointment to the commission. And
Great.
if there's a consensus on that, I'll send that in.
Anybody disagree or feel we need to?
Half a month.
No, I totally agree.
We'll look and see.
You're
We'll
lucky
accept
my
your-
wife isn't here.
We'll accept your
You
draft.
too, isn't it?
Well, unread, you go ahead.
Okay.
Sign it forward. Thank
I
you
had it
for taking
prepared.
care of all that.
I had it prepared for Doug's signature, so I just have to put off getting it signed. I anticipate his absence tonight.
Well, I can sign it, and then I can sign his name and then initial it if you want me to.
Sure.
That would take care of that. Sorry about that.
What's the date again?
28th.
22, 2020.
had listed down another item for discussion, but the discussion of that would take way longer than the few minutes before the next.
What item was that?
The DEP proposed regulatory.
Okay, you
Changes.
could take that up after the regular part of the meeting.
Yes.
I just mentioned that Sam has a need to leave as soon as possible tonight, so I'd like to move the meeting along expeditiously if we could.
Sure.
He could feel free to skip that part and or comment to you outside of it, because you probably got a copy right now.
Do you wanna,
Judy's coming.
pardon?
Judy's coming.
Okay. Do you wanna start and open the first request to determine applicability?
Is Mr. DiTullio here, our representative? Do we need him here?
Not technically, actually, he was being represented by the Gibraltar Pool folks. Legal notice.
Legal notice Raleigh Conservation Commission in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law 131, Section 40 as amended, and the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Public meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 28th, 2013 at 7:45 p.m. at room 5 of the Town Hall Annex at 39 Central Street to consider a request for determination of applicability application filed by Rocco C. DiTullio for proposed installation of an above-ground pool, possibly within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands and outside the 25-foot no-cut, no disturbance zone at 137 Hillside Street, map 19, parcel 1, lot 11 in Raleigh, Massachusetts.
Representative,
Jay Henshaw from Gibraltar Pools.
Thank you.
Obviously, you know what we're here for. So I guess I need to know what you need from me.
I'm sorry?
Excuse me, my throat is messed up. I guess I need to know what you need from me. DEP filing, did you guys ever read this? And
Just
Yeah,
pick
that.
that. Yeah, great.
and I don't know if you need anything else here.
I have a memo I prepared today, you may not have seen. Jay? Jay? Jay?
Oh, yeah, I did,
Oh, did you see that?
I caught this, yeah, just before I was leaving, I saw it. Sorry if I seem a little frazzled. Day after Memorial Day for a swimming pool company is hell day.
I bet.
Yeah.
First come, first served, right?
Ah. Okay. All right, obviously, what we're attempting to do is build an above-ground pool. Due to the septic system being in the front of the house, there's no other area in this yard it can go. This is the only application that's anywhere near practical. And I believe you can see the plans right here. We have all septic up here, and because of the grading here, it just wouldn't work. Obviously, you know, as far as chemically treated water, any drainage occurs with the dissipation period observed. We'll be using a cartridge filter closed system, so there won't be any backwash. If we are allowed to move it a little bit, as he suggested, it would minimize any grading we have to do almost to nothing. It's an established lawn area.
Chairman, would you like me to read out loud the discussion portion of my memo?
Yes, please.
Okay, the applicant is proposing the installation of a 12-foot by 24-foot above-ground pool on a portion of the maintained lawn that lies within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. The development of this property was subject to an order of conditions which established a restricted no-cut, no-disturbance zone, it's 25 foot, I believe, that extended past the limit of work and intruded upon what was to be maintained lawn. This, for those looking at the sketch plan, you can see an inked line that crosses the erosion control, which is represented by hay bales or a segmented line that looks like a worm or whatever. This is, well, anyway. Okay, extended past the limit of work and intruded upon what was to be maintained lawn. This advertently put in place a conflict relating to this restriction and the care of the lawn. There are also indications relating to the contoured grading of the property and the existence of an overgrown detention basin that this portion of the lawn was proposed to function as a grass swale and conduct stormwater from the driveway area to the basin. There are no site indications that this area has ever conducted overland flow for such a distance, nor that the basin has ever seen an accumulation of stormwater. The slope upgrading of the existing stone wall, which again is shown by the depiction of a portion of a stone wall right adjacent to the delineated edge of the bordering vegetated wetlands. That area is not maintained and would, under present circumstances, be considered as the realistic boundary of a proposed no-cut, no-disturbance area. If the commission would allow the repositioning of the proposed pool, that would eliminate excavation into the graded slope of the maintained rear yard. The commission may wish to consider a vote to adjust the imposed condition to conform to the original location of the erosion controls limit of work from when the property was developed in order to reduce the conflict inherent with a developed area that is not restored to original conditions. This is almost the same kind of problem we ran into at Fox Meadows, where grading, clearing, and excavation went into what was to become conservation restricted area that was supposed to be a natural vegetated plant community, either woods or field. So this is the same kind of thing. This is actually a situation where the proposed no cut, no disturb line should have more than likely been variable width, because it also went through what was proposed as the basin too. It appears that there may have been an overestimation of the amount of runoff that would be shed from the driveway coming down from the hillside. Currently the driveway's got a small curb or berm in the front of it to prevent street runoff from coming down the driveway. And then the driveway has a fair portion of maintained lawn before it drops down over this kind of terrace and then comes into the area which is proposed for the pool installation, which seems to have a contour making it like a slight swale that then proceeds for almost 130 feet before it finally gets to the basin. A grassed swale that length will, of course, have some infiltration characteristics of its own, but there's no on-site indications that this area even holds water, let alone conducts water all the way from one side of the property to the opposite side, where the basin is apparently located. It's kind of, the basin's sort of in this overgrown area right here. This shows you the first drop down to the area where the pool is proposed to be, and then that's the stone wall right there, and this is just all naturally vegetated, it's not maintained as lawn at all.
This is the proposed location here?
Although I'm suggesting that it be shifted a little bit, it was set like this to try and respect that restriction line, but that causes, you have to excavate into that graded slope that drops down to make the terrace. And it just doesn't seem realistic to facilitate all that earth disturbance for a no-cut, no-disturb line, which is not monumented at all. And they're maintaining lawn and stuff there as anyone would naturally do, since the erosion control or limit of work allowed grading and lawn to be established up into that area.
So you're suggesting pushing it back this way?
Yeah, I'm
Somewhat.
suggesting that realistically, for both the property owner and the commission to have something that's practical and workable, that it would make more sense to basically just declare that it should be a variable width, no cut, no disturbance zone, and should follow that limit, that previous limit of work. Basically up to the edge of the maintained lawn.
Does the applicant have any objection to that?
Not at all.
Okay.
What's the grade on that? It drops off quick, eh?
Yeah.
2-3 feet?
Now, what are you talking about? From that terrace down to there, 5 or 6 feet.
Yeah.
Mm.
5 or 6 feet. And there's enough width of that terraced area, even though it's, like I said, it's kind of contoured as a swale, but it's not excessively deep. There's enough width to more or less center the pool installation
Right.
into that, which then will allow a maintenance strip towards the side that's already being maintained as lawn, but it'll cut down on the amount of excavation that has to go into that slope to try and put the pool in.
So there's gonna be a deck that's gonna come off that onto that terraced?
It's not gonna touch it, no, the deck is just a structural component of the pool, it's a cantilever.
Right?
So basically, we only need the footprint of the pool itself, which
Yeah.
is I believe on this one's a 12 by 24 foot area. The decking overhangs, no contact with the ground, so.
Be all right if it did, I'm just.
Yeah, it's just suspended decking.
Do you wanna use this as an opportunity to put some Conservation Commission no cut, no disturb signs up, or?
Well, to be honest with you, where the pool company is representing the owner in regards to really the installation of the pool here, if the commission wishes, I can put a call in to the property owner and initiate a discussion with them about putting up a couple posts with signs. I'm a little hesitant though with having, you know, the pool company.
Understood, yeah, but are you comfortable doing that, or would you?
Yeah, well, if effectively, because of the grading and the way the property was developed, that slope kind of accomplishes that anyway.
And then you get the rock wall that's preventing any deeper
Well, yes,
intrusion,
but again, you have to go down
and slope.
a non-grassed
Yeah.
slope that's, I don't know if it's got raspberries or blackberries growing there right now, which does not make you want to jump right in there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is,
and
is the grass line more or less the hay bale line?
Yes, as near as I can tell. And part of that has to do with the fact of the contouring of this. You can see this very well-defined edge. And that's also what they've been maintaining too, as lawn, because it was graded, loamed, and seeded.
any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Anybody in the audience wanna add anything to that, subtract anything? Hearing none, I think I'm looking for a motion to consider the hearing closed and issuing a negative determination, option number 3, with the conditions listed in Brent's memorandum and with the understanding, subject to homeowner approval of the signage that we talked about.
Postal signs.
Yeah. Does anyone have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None?
No.
May I also suggest, if I may I request a confirmation motion in regards to acting upon the suggestion to adjust that 25-foot restriction to a variable width restriction to the limit of work? Just to go on record so that that's established, and when I have the conversation with the property owner, be able to relate that we also did that too.
Alright, is
So
there a motion to
moved.
that effect?
So moved.
Any move, second?
Second.
David, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, may I copy this permit so I can give it to the applicant? Sure. And here's the legal notice for the.
When do you propose starting this pool?
Do I have to wait for letter of conditions?
You might wanna wait until Brent receives homeowner approval. What would you recommend, Brent? With regard to the change? Or the signage?
I think it would be fine if we just kept those as two non-linked things. I mean,
So he's free to go ahead.
I would say so,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay, this is the legal notice, Raleigh Conservation Commission, in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law 131, Section 40 as amended. In the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw, a public meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 28, 2013 at 8 p.m. at the Room 5 of the Town Hall Annex at 39 Central Street to consider a request for determination of applicability application filed by Hugh L. Graham, H.L. Graham Associates, Inc. for the wetlands delineation and proposed soil evaluations possibly within the 200-foot riverfront area of Ox Pasture Brook at 36 Cross Street, map 24, parcel 43 in Raleigh, Massachusetts. I believe we have Mr. Phipps with us tonight, and anyone else?
Yes, I'm Kendra Cooper.
Kendra Cooper?
Yes, I did not get a notice, by the way. I noticed, I did stop at Conservation last Thursday after it was advertised in the Newburyport News. And that's when I picked up from Brent these documents, including the May 21st plan. I don't know, do you have a more recent one than May 21st, or is that what's here?
I believe the plan is being submitted to us
May
tonight.
Okay, well, I just have the May 21st plan. And apparently the packet was sent to me using my maiden name and to Merle Phibbs' house on Fennel Drive. So I didn't receive it. At least not, certainly not until Thursday when I went to Conservation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
In past rulings, DEP in appeal situations, the fact that the property owner is present this evening constitutes that they have received notification.
Okay.
I understand it's constructive, but at the same time, the DEP.
No, this is not a constructive, excuse me, this is not a constructive approval.
My obtaining it from you was ultimately constructive because I didn't receive it when everyone else did receive it, when it went out, and that is one of the things that DEP mentions. That aside, I just want you to know that I did not have the amount of time that other people did to look through the materials.
Well, hopefully tonight will give you an opportunity to be filled in as we will be filled in, and ask any questions and present any concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else here with regard to that application? You're?
Hugh L. Graham, applicant.
Okay. Would you like to present the?
Sure. Would be a good place for this up here, maybe,
The easel,
for the
the easel.
audience to see too, as well.
however-
Yeah, if you can put it up there,
Get
sure.
it there. Put clips on clips. This is a Rube Goldberg device if I ever saw one.
That'll work. That's good.
Probably sever a digit too.
I am Hugh L. Graham, of H.L. Graham Associates, also known and most often known as Larry Graham. And I am here tonight for an RDA which we filed for the purpose of conducting some soils testing on the subject property 36 Cross Street. Haskell Kassler is an attorney in Boston with the Boston firm of Kasner and Edwards. Mr. Kassler, again I'm confused, Kassler and Kasner, but Mr. Kassler was appointed special master for the sale of this property and engaged our firm to do an assessment or an evaluation on the property with respect to, initially when he called me up, some soils testing. As I looked into it, it certainly on the surface appeared that we had to do more work other than just to do some soils testing. So I did engage a wetland botanist who went out and flagged the Ox Pasture Brook bank and also the BVW that borders Ox Pasture Brook. That is on the west side of the property. The east side of the property has a vernal pool, which is off property, but there is a BVW also associated with the vernal pool on the east side of the property. And as you look at the plan there, you can see that the buffer zones wrap around and join each other near the rear of the property. So even though when you walk back behind the existing house on the property, there's a very nice large field, it appears that one could easily perhaps put a house on it. It was a real task to try to figure out where we could also perhaps soils test results depending, locate a primary soil absorption system for a new house and a reserve soil absorption system for the new house, as well as a replacement or repair system for the existing house. Those areas really is why we went to the extent that we did with the wetlands delineation and the buffer zones. Those areas are highlighted on your plan and as well on this plan here. The proposed primary for perhaps a new home in red, the reserve area in yellow, and in blue, the replacement system for the existing home. I'm holding on to these. I probably should have given you these at the beginning of the property. They're the green cards that we got back. And with respect to the discussion that just occurred, we went to 18 Fennel Drive, which was the address on the town hall records as far as notifying Gordon and Phipps. So I didn't have any other address to go to. This was also advertised in the paper. Do you need that, Brent?
Yes. Yeah, the tear sheet, thank you.
So what we're looking for this evening perhaps is the commission's approval to do soils testing in these highlighted areas, period. That's all that we're here to do. It's not about the house which is drawn on the plan. It's not about the driveway, because if we don't get good results as far as the soils test go, as the development of the property is not going to happen. It's going to be a single one-house lot. As you look at the plan, you'll see a lot of dimensions on there besides the resource areas. Blue is the bank of Ox Pasture. Light blue over here is the vernal pool. The blue dash line, or solid light blue line here, is 100 feet off of the vernal pool. The dashed blue lines are 100 and 200 feet off of West Ox Pasture, or Ox Pasture Brook, defining the riverfront area. Other points of interest on here, we did impose a potential division line of the property here. It does comply with zoning to the best of my knowledge, and as well the other dimensions that you see on there, 30 feet, 75 feet, so forth, are dimensions which we would have to comply with for the location of these septic systems as far as Title V and Board of Health regulations, local Board of Health regulations go. So there was a lot of work to be done before we could go out there and do any soils testing, and Mr. Kassler understands that now. And again, we're here just to seek your approval to go out and do that testing.
Assuming the testing is successful, you'd have to come back before us with regard to the proposed driveway?
Yes. And the house. I mean, everything really. The whole property.
Is the existing septic system on the existing house failed, or is it just because it's being sold?
I don't know for sure if it's failed. It lies down in this area right here. All you can see that I observed from the surface is a manhole cover. So it would be on the new lot, if you will. so it would have to be replaced. And in replacing it, the handicap ramps that are on the west side of the house would have to come off, because that system would need to fit in there to stay out of the restricted areas.
This is Aldine Gordon's former home.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Brent, your thoughts?
Well, yes, I did not prepare a written out memo for the commission due to crunch of time, having a Monday holiday. But verbally, if I could, actually, the applicant is requesting confirmation of sections of the wetlands delineation on here that actually drive the buffer zone delineation, because the Board of Health has a restriction on new septic systems not being sited within the 100-foot buffer zone. They require a 100-foot separation to the edge of building vegetated wetlands, i.e. basically they prohibit a new system within the 100-foot buffer zone to BBW. So part of my review focused on the portions of the bordering vegetated wetlands delineation that seem to be the trigger or key points for measurement in depicting the 100-foot buffer zone as it relates to where soil evaluations are proposed on the property. So therefore, I reviewed, to start off, I reviewed the first 3 flags of the top of bank for the riverfront delineation, which was flags B1 to B3. I then reviewed 2 segments of the bordering vegetated wetlands line. The first one flagged A6 to A12, and then I requested.
Would you like me to point that out while you're speaking?
Sure, that would be helpful.
So
flags-
B1 through B3.
Yeah,
And then A6 to 12,
yeah, A6 to 12,
6 is there.
and the original A13 I determined had not been positioned accurately due to an obligate wetland species, the skunk cabbage, which was stampeding uphill, as one might say, and therefore we repositioned and hung a new flag, A13A, and then that was kind of the trigger or main parameter for the 100-foot buffer zone to the area of testing proposed for the one side of the area for the new dwelling. I guess you said that was the reserve system site.
Can you hear in the back of the room?
Yes.
So-
We'll have an opportunity to ask questions.
Oh, sure.
So then I moved to the other side of the property, to the easternmost side boundary. And because the vernal pool area was depicted with approximate 90-degree angles, which is not normally a feature of natural systems or depressions, I did check that, and actually there is the possibility that on the side closest to Cross Street that there actually is a fingerling projection there based on stained leaves and stuff that just wasn't inundated at the time we were there. But then I reviewed the bordering vegetated wetlands flagging starting at flag number A48 and proceeding to A51. Did a couple of confirmatory soil augerings, mainly to look at flag A49, I believe it is. That is the main one there. And basically confirmed, or I was in substantial agreement with where that was hung. So the request to the commission tonight will include confirming the 200-foot riverfront boundary as delineated from flags B1 to B3, the 100-foot buffer zone, and the bordering vegetated wetlands represented by flags A6 to A12, then A13A, and then A14, and then the flag series A48 to A51. Would also recommend that a statement be made that all the other delineations shown on the plan are not confirmed by this decision tonight. In regards to the areas proposed for the soil evaluations, I have distributed to the commission a recommendation in regards to potential conditions involving that, but I just wanted to let the commission know that those areas proposed for soil testing are all in areas that have either previously been maintained as lawn or have been at least maintained in an open field condition. They're approximately level, very slight slopes, so there's no particular issue with excavation activity occurring there and the need for erosion control. That's kind of based on the assumption that the soil evaluations will probably be done within a 24-hour period and the holes backfilled, and so there won't be any stockpiling. But we have pretty much standard conditions. I'd just like to read those into suggested conditions and read those into the record.
Before you start, do you folks have copies of those special conditions?
I just have a copy of the 521.
No, that wasn't distributed to the audience.
Could we distribute a copy to those?
And I have copies to distribute.
Yes.
All right, can you use mine and make a quick copy?
Just a second.
I can explain that as far as the septic goes, the septic did fail when we had some testing done. That the cesspool is right about where the driveway is proposed, so there would have to be changes.
That's why they're proposing to move it.
Yeah, well, they have cesspool and there's a septic next to the garage as well, so there are two things.
Where is that, Mr. Graham? Mr. Graham, are you aware that there's also a cesspool in addition to the septic system?
No, I wasn't. This is the garage here. And if there is, if this moves to the next step of repairing this, everything will have to come to this field irregardless of where it is now.
Right, that's it. My understanding was that something new, especially since my sister sold their 2/3 interest to Mr. Phipps, who's not a family member, then some of the requirements that normally would kick in are different now.
I think Brent alluded to those before.
I don't know.
Do you wish me to?
Yeah, but please continue, I'm sorry to interrupt.
So anyway, proposed special conditions for 36 Cross Street are, number one, the Raleigh Conservation Commission and its agent shall have the right to enter and inspect the property at any time for compliance with these conditions in the Town of Raleigh's Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Two, an appropriately sized spill containment kit, parentheses, or materials for spill cleanup, end of parentheses, shall be available on site at all times while equipment is on site. And this is due to the proximity of water resources. Number three, temporary erosion control used if needed to prevent erosion and sediment transport into undisturbed areas or onto abutting property. Four, inspection of erosion control by RCC/staff if utilized. Number five, soil evaluation holes to be backfilled and stabilized utilizing mulching, parentheses, and reseeding, end of parentheses, to promote revegetation on the same day they are excavated. Number six, the erosion control shall be properly maintained if installed, in parentheses, until final stabilization of the disturbed areas by vegetation is accomplished. And seven, notification of the RCC office upon completion of proposed soil evaluations, excavation, and stabilization efforts. That's it.
Even though you label these special conditions, that's pretty standard to what we usually require in these instances.
Well, yes, again, because this activity does fit within, I guess, what we would say would be the norm in terms of the site conditions, which is why I mentioned that there were level areas and there was no extremely close proximity to wetland resource areas or a water course, which is one of the reasons why the delineations were being evaluated and confirmed on here. So yes, you could say that these are standard conditions, but they're also looked as being a practical consideration for what resource areas are on or immediately adjacent to this property.
Commissioner commissioners have any observations, thoughts, questions?
It's pretty straightforward.
Hearing none, Mr. Phipps or Ms. Cooper, do you have any concerns, thoughts, questions,
Not offhand.
comments?
Yes, I was wondering, to do the testing, the soil testing, will you have to remove that wheelchair ramp to be able to bring the backhoe in? Or can you,
The question is, to do the soils testing near this existing wheelchair ramp, would we have to remove that for the testing? And the answer is no. It would have to be removed for the installation of the system if it goes to that extent. The wheelchair ramp is, extends into that area, if I could, right here. It's an extension of this red. So we can come around and do the testing that we need to on the backside. The health agent prefers us to. We could also do a test hole in the front. So we can cover the area. We only need to do 2 deep holes and 1 log, and there's plenty of room to do that.
so, I'm a little concerned at how close that is to that porch. To the porch that's, it's a screen porch that the wheelchair ramp comes off. And it looks like it's only about 10 feet away. I think, is that
Yeah.
correct? It's about 10 feet?
Yes.
You can't tell from this map I have.
Yes, if, again, if it goes to the design and construction of the system here, we would be obligated to maintain 10 feet from the porch because there is no cellar underneath that part, and 20 feet from this corner of the house because it is a cellar. Those are setbacks at Title V and local regulations. So, yes, we would be within 10 feet of that porch, more than 10 feet.
I understand that this is a soils testing. I believe that's the only thing that you're looking at right now is the applicability as conservation, the applicability of those specific areas for the septic. But and I know this is a concept plan, but I also was concerned with, in this concept plan, it shows removal of the garage and removal of the shed, and or a variance for the garage instead, and is that something that, does this have any meaning to us right now, is what I'm saying, or is this something that, will come up again for
Well,
conservation?
If this soil testing fails, if I understood Mr. Graham properly, it's a moot point. Then no changes will be made presumably, but otherwise I would say those things will have to come before us again.
Right, and so this soils testing, if it is favorable, does that automatically mean that this property can be divided and a house could be put on the back? Or is that something that's not even being considered at this meeting?
That question's not within our jurisdiction. We're solely here to determine the wetland applicability of what's being proposed here.
Would that be a notice of intent that someone would come back to?
They would
for
probably need to file a notice of intent, yes, to do all that.
that instead, so that even if the soil tests are successful, we will not be really able to say that the property could be subdivided and a second house built on the field and back from the soil test results. You can't say that.
That's not up to us to, again, it's not within our jurisdiction, and even if it's successful, the applicant could abandon the whole thing.
Right,
So it
yeah.
may never come before us, but the chances are it probably would. It's a lot of work to go to just to.
Someone mentioned that there was, that the road, they'd have to come back to you for that little driveway that would go in the back as well.
I presume the planning board would get involved as well.
Okay, and, all right,
Well, the commission is solely charged with reviewing activities that may alter, remove, dredge, or fill regulated areas, including wetland resource areas. And further, under the wetlands bylaw, we're charged with regulating identified wetland resource areas and special areas under the bylaw again, that would alter, remove, dredge, or fill. That's solely what the commission has jurisdiction over, not zoning, not anything else.
My impression
Just-
was that this is more to determine applicability of even your oversight in this session tonight.
Only
Which-
our oversight.
Which, yeah, and it appears that we've got a lot of wetlands and a vernal pool, which I, growing up on that land, know all about. But and it may be that the house may be just for a single dwelling as it has been. And that's why I have concern that if this indeed is a single lot, that the possibility of the ramp remaining and my mother possibly coming back would be there as an option, depending on, you know, what happens with the disposal of the property by the courts.
Mr. Graham is shaking his head yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts? Your recommendation, Brent, as to what you're looking for?
If the commission would show desire based on the discussion we've had so far and the submittal of the special conditions, recommend positive determination, options 2A and 2B as I read earlier, and negative determination number 3 with the attached special conditions that have been read into the record.
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Or a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Motion passed.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask also, for future notification, can I receive notification to my home in Reading as opposed to,
If you wish to
Notice is
submit
going-
any information that would allow us to communicate with you, that would be fine.
I was just wondering what I would need to do, because
Submit it.
Okay.
You
all
came
right.
into the office, copied the record, and said it went to the wrong address, but you never gave us a correct address or any type of contact information.
Well, I've only lived in Reading 30 years and I've been married 40, so for my maiden name to be used and to be sent to Mr. Phipps's property is a little unusual.
Apparently, you'd have to have a discussion with the law firm that arranged Mr. Graham's services.
No, they are all aware.
Small town records don't change easily.
Well, actually, they changed in January apparently, because I was getting mail up to that point.
If I may, this gentleman is working for the lawyer that's been assigned as special master in the petition to partition the property. And it wasn't my determination to have it sent to me rather than her. I figured that each of us got one, it just had the names, both names were on the envelope, and I figured she got one also. I had no occasion to call her and say I had one.
As long as Brent has the correct information, we'll make sure that You know,
Notification.
future notices will be made as appropriate, plus there will be advertising of any notice of intent in the Newburyport Daily News and I believe the Town Common. Is that correct, Brent?
Just one paper.
Which one?
But I picked it up in the Newburyport,
Yeah.
so.
One of them.
Can be either.
One or the other.
Town Common's a lot less expensive than the Daily News is.
Yeah, but they only publicize weekly, so therefore it's sometimes a challenge to get it advertised for the proper number of days.
Understood.
I'll be mailing your decision.
I can give you my address tonight, Brent. Is that okay?
Brent, did you hear?
Yeah.
Is it okay if I give you my
I'm
address
open to you
tonight?
giving me
And then-
anything and everything, including dark chocolate.
Oh, that's good, I have that.
Not to be considered an incentive.
As long as it doesn't exceed $50.
Yeah. Can't do that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, Larry, is this your portfolio?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll miss it tomorrow.
My wife tried to throw one of those up, it looked just like that the other day. I stopped her. Real lives and spring cleaning.
Yeah. And here's the next legal office. Mr. Chairman.
Legal notice, Raleigh Conservation Commission, in accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw. The public meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 28, 2013, at 8:15 p.m. Room 5 of the Town Hall Annex at 39 Central Street to consider a request for determination of applicability application filed by Chester Beatrice for proposed soil evaluations for design of sewage disposal system,
Thank you very much.
possibly within the DEP-approved groundwater protection area Zone 2 at 892 Haverhill Street, map 4, parcel 5 in Raleigh, Massachusetts. Chester Beatrice, sorry. Are you Mr. Beatrice?
I'm not. My name is Jim Scanlon. I am here on behalf of Chester Beatrice. I'm his engineer. We are before you, having filed a request for determination to do soil testing on Mr. Beatrice's property. He has a 3-bedroom dwelling with a system that is currently in failure. He is selling his property, and that's what triggered it. And we are proposing to do soil testing on his lot, which is entirely in the zone, the DEP Zone 2. There is a intermittent stream to the south of the property, in the rear of the property, off Locust. However, we are not proposing any work within 100 feet of the top of bank. We have shown on our plan the proposed area where we would like to test. And we would ask for your, I guess would be approval to do the soil testing.
Have you seen the memo? They were done kind of late today, so you may not have seen that.
Yes, you emailed it?
Yep.
Yep, I did get a copy
You
of
did
it.
get
I
it.
have
Okay,
it.
great.
In fact, I do
Okay.
have a copy of it,
And would you happen to have the tear sheet from the paper?
I certainly do.
Newspaper ad?
as well as the green card.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, would you care for me to read into the record the discussion portion of my memo?
Yes, please.
Okay, the applicant is proposing to conduct soil evaluations for design of a replacement sewage disposal system. The area where the excavations are proposed is very level and is partially previously maintained as lawn and adjacent to a wetland, to a wooded area without maintained ground cover. The majority of the property is within DEP-approved groundwater protection area Zone 2. The rear of the property abuts the conservation restricted area of the Pingree Farms Condo Association. Just off the rear of the parcel is an intermittent stream fringed by bordering vegetated wetlands whose 100-foot buffer zone extends onto this property. The proposed soil evaluations are located outside of that 100-foot buffer zone. It should also be noted that bordering land subject to flooding may occur within the stream channel, which doesn't extend onto this property. The proposed excavation area has been staked to mark its extent. And so, in the memo, I suggest, unless there are additional concerns to be addressed, the commission may wish to consider closing the hearing and issuing a positive determination, option number 5, with the following conditions for the Zone 2, and a positive determination, option number 6, as not subject to the Wetlands Protection Act. The conditions are as follows. The Raleigh Conservation Commission and its agents shall have the right to enter and inspect the property at any time for compliance with these conditions in the Town of Raleigh's Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Number 2, an appropriately sized spill containment kit or materials for spill cleanup, parentheses, shall be available on site at all times while equipment is on site. Number 3, temporary erosion control used if needed to prevent erosion and sediment transport into undisturbed areas or onto the abutting property. Inspection of the erosion control by RCC/staff if utilized. Number 5, soil evaluation holes to be backfilled and stabilized, utilizing mulching and reseeding, in parentheses, to promote revegetation on the same day they are excavated. And number 6, the erosion control shall be properly maintained, parentheses, if installed, until final stabilization of the disturbed areas by vegetation is accomplished. Notification of the RCC office upon completion of the proposed soil evaluations, excavating, and stabilization efforts. And yes, again, these conditions probably do sound a little repetitive, and and consistent, but that's because the sites we evaluated tonight have the luxury of being almost tabletop flat and not in close proximity to any sensitive wetland resource areas or steep slopes.
Are you comfortable with the memorandum and what's proposed in there?
I just have one question. I'm not familiar with what a spill containment kit would consist of.
Well, probably whoever you have as an equipment operator, or is that you?
No, no. No.
I didn't know how many talents you had, so.
Yeah.
They should be familiar with that, but basically it can be as simple as some heavy-duty plastic bags and
Oh, okay.
speedy dry, or something
Okay.
like that, in case they have hydraulic hose ruptures or some type of unexpected leak of either fuel or any of the fluids in the equipment. Since it is a zone 2, we'd like to have materials right there that can be used to stop it from seeping into the ground and absorb it and then dispose of it in an appropriate manner.
And then as far as number 3, the temporary erosion control,
Again, that's, I know normally the modus operandi is to come in, dig the hole, and backfill it right in the same day.
Yeah.
That's for if something else unexpected happens, i.e. get the hole halfway excavated, equipment breaks down, can't fix it, thunderstorms on the way with potential
Okay.
rainfall of an inch or more, you'll put something around the stockpile so that it doesn't
oh, okay,
start
so we don't
washing
have, we don't have to put it
No,
up
you don't have to put it up
prior to, just.
prior to, and again, a number of assumptions are made, but that's just in there in case,
Oh, okay,
you know, Murphy's Law.
sure, sure.
If everything goes to plan, then you won't need it.
Okay,
Mm.
fair enough.
Any comments, questions, observations by the commissioners? Anybody from the audience otherwise?
Sandy.
Okay. Looking for a motion in line with the recommendation to close the hearing and issue a positive determination, option 5, with the following conditions indicated in Brent's memo for the zone 2, and positive determination, option 6, as not being subject to the Wetlands Protection Act.
So moved.
Wait a second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? It should be some reference to a system. I just know Aldina's still alive. How old is she? It's unreal. Experience of trouble with this. So sure. Visited with a 9-year-old, so sure did. She's been the last 3 years.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
so
sir.
the next agenda item is a continued notice of intent. If you just, you just want to read the agenda item, but we have received a request for a continuance on it. I think Mr. Weir is here, and he's possibly going to give me an actual signed one.
Oh,
the record?
that, actually, I don't, I can sign that one.
Oh, okay.
The next item,
Oh, may I have,
which reading through my scribbling says continued notice of intent for 420 Newburyport Turnpike, map 18, parcel 3 and 340, Weathersfield Street, oh, yes. Map 18, parcel 5, lot 21 through 1B, 420 Newburyport Turnpike, LLS, construction of 2 commercial buildings, additions, stormwater facilities, utilities, and grading possibly within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. The commission has been in receipt of a request to continue this to June 18th. Would you like a motion to that effect?
I believe the chair should entertain that. Yes.
All right, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Weir is present, and it turns out since the agenda was put together, he is also serving as a representative to Mr. John Coughlin, who is on the agenda for the 9 o'clock and 9:15. If he could be allowed to briefly update the commission, I don't believe he's got a long convoluted presentation.
Well, Mr. DeSenker is here, and if it's okay with him. George, do you mind if we jump ahead of you a little bit here? Come on in and sit down.
I'm gonna stand, thank you.
Okay. I know you've got a busy evening with the Cub Scouts, but
Well, no, it's my prosthetics act now. No, I think we're all set for a few minutes, huh, guys?
This will be quick.
okay.
Few minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Charlie, you're up.
Just a few,
So,
just a few.
we have 2 issues going on. It's 2, you can have both of them. The first one is the survey of the top of the hill. And what we did is and I walked this, we reflagged this wetlands line, and I walked it last week with Brent, taking a look at it. And in this plan,
I'm just gonna footnote that, we survey relocated the flag points.
the 5 points, right?
Didn't follow anything previously.
Right, we reset points that had been set. So those are on the ground now. And then the second thing we did, we did the topography of the mulch pile that we've now, we've dropped that in and we put the limits in the mulch pile. You can see that the toe of the steepest slope is right at the 100-foot buffer, but then there's kind of an overspill from the pile which goes into the buffer zone, probably about 10 or 15 feet. So we've depicted that. That was, I guess, the first part of the enforcement order was to provide an updated plan. From here, I'll sit down with John and we've met with Brent about what the remedial action will be, but the next step will be for me and John to sit down and
Next step is to put together a proposed sequence covering the removal and then reseeding and restoration.
But the first step was to create this plan which documents the actual violation. So that's that. Secondly, there's very, excuse
So we're
me,
gonna need a continuation on that again?
yes.
Well, you technically don't need to continue this again. This is an enforcement action. You basically, if you're satisfied with the direction we're moving in, we had this little hiccup. If you're satisfied with the direction that you're moving in, the commission in the past has, unless different requirements come up or different issues, has been comfortable with just voting to direct me as your agent to work with the applicant and produce a directive that has the correct documentation so that the restoration and correction activities can be taken and the site returned to compliance. So,
Okay, you want that motion right now?
Sure.
All right, do I hear a motion to that effect?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
And this is the second violation at the bottom of the hill. Here is Route 1. This is the entrance. And what we did was we took the topography, the as-built topography that we had done actually a number of years ago, and we've gone in, we've re-flagged this wetlands finger which comes up in here. And then there was no change in the topography of the area, there was just removal of vegetation. So we just defined the limit of the disturbance so that we've documented the area of disturbance. From here we'll provide this to Mike DeRosa, and Mike can perfect his planting plan in accordance. I think he went out.
Yeah, he sort of
cut
already
and
has it
taped
together, yeah.
Right, but now he can make it 100% accurate, and we also show, for example, where there was riverfront mitigation that was done in here as part of the old water use. So it kind of gives us a sense of where that is on the ground. It shows that there is a pocket of wetlands here. So it kind of gives all the flavor of the resource areas which are around. So, and again, that's more, the first step was to document it, and then from here I think that Brent will sit down with Mike DeRosa and look at his report, and we'll perfect that from here.
want a similar motion to the last?
Yes, if you would please.
Describe that, about what that motion will be again, please.
To direct the agent to work with representatives of the property owner to craft a directive and to put together the restoration plan for the site returning to compliance.
Okay, do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Charlie.
you. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope that was fine. Thank you. Good. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience from Coastal Landscape? Okay. They were invited at the commission's request. I was directed to copy them with an enforcement order, naming them as a party to the violation at 12 to 40 Forest Ridge Drive, which is the frontage of Newburyport Turnpike. I spoke to a gentleman who described himself as the principal and requested his attendance here tonight, and related to him that the commission had specifically asked for his presence to discuss their role or participation in the violation that occurred. I've had no further communications, and I don't understand why they're not here tonight.
Okay,
I just wanted to let the commission know.
let's take that up at the end of the meeting.
Well, right, but I just wanted to report to you while we were on this item that
Appreciate that, yes.
I had implemented your request.
Thinking of that when I was looking at the agenda.
Yes, I'm recusing myself on the next item because I have a plot. That's right.
The plot thickens.
The plot
The
thickens.
plot is thick, I'll tell you, the grass has grown, it's time for me to get over there.
It is.
Renner?
Shall I read the item
I
on
don't
the
wanna sit
agenda?
in front
Sure.
of the,
Alright. The next item is 8:45 PM on the agenda, notice of violation, Brad Street Farm, open space parcel, community garden easement, Main Street, Lot A, parcel, map 96, parcel 26, Lot 1, unauthorized soil disturbance and expansion.
And just to let the commission know that Mr. Barry Moore came in, present this evening, came in and spoke to me in the office, and we discussed a suggestion of utilizing vegetative mulch or compost to stabilize the area of disturbance. Mr. Moore was able to obtain from, I think, Sam Herrick's farm, some of the landscape grass clippings that are dropped off by landscapers for the Herrick farm to work into compost. And he put down a grass mulch and removed a number of the sticks so that the grass mulch could contact and lay on the disturbed edge where the soil drops off about a foot and wasn't held in place by anything, so that has been done. Thankfully accomplished before the rain.
Good point. Well, where do we stand overall then?
Well, basically,
Basically, things that have needed to be done have been done.
well, no, we need some final guidance in regards to this. There's three issues, and one of them, this commission is not empowered to actually deal with. So the first issue was soil disturbance that was outside the easement of the community garden area. And so that activity, which had not originally been proposed to the commission, when the open space plot was laid out, the creation of the subdivision plans identified an easement area for the positioning of the community gardens. It appeared from the original documentation that that easement didn't take into account the positioning of the stone wall that formed a hedgerow between the fields at that location. And so I believe in 2010, the commission was requested to approve an expansion. I think they originally requested maybe 14 plots, and the commission approved 12, I think it was, on what I guess you could describe as sort of the southwesterly side of the stone wall. And so a plan, I believe I was directed to produce a plan which has formed the basis for understanding where the location of the plots are currently laid out, and where the boundary of the easement was, and where the commission made an adjustment for those additional 12 plots and created an access way around that. So there was a defined easement on the plans that the town procured and accepted for the Brad Street property acquisition. The commission received an application and produced a plan for the expansion of the garden plots and gardening activity. And then recently, the reason for this notice being issued was the expansion of activity that inadvertently went outside of what had been the originally prescribed easement for community gardening. So I guess, I don't know, you can ascertain if there's going to be a request coming for an expansion into siting the compost pile and turning it and working it just outside of the easement, but that would still be within the Conservation Commission's open space. So the second issue, which I briefly alluded to already partially being addressed, was the failure to utilize and install appropriate erosion controls to control the disturbed soils. Again, Mr. Moore took steps to address the fact that there was a severe edge where the material just dropped straight down and wasn't stabilized or held in place. And I guess the commission might want to direct that the bare soils be seeded or maybe entirely mulched and possibly seeded to try and achieve some kind of permanent stabilization to where bare soils have been exposed. And then the third issue, which I'm not sure the commission has any authority to address, is that in taping out the area of disturbance, as can be seen on this 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and as well as I tried to depict on the aerial photographs, that it appears the work and some of the clearing and the scraping of the soils and the piling of the brush for the vegetation that had been on those piles of sediment has gone across the boundary line and appears to have intruded on the Parks and Recreation Department parcel, which I believe is under the purview of the Board of Selectmen. And so those are the three items.
Let's deal with the second one first. Barry, are you comfortable with the recommendation to mulch and seed that area that Brent was talking about?
We can do that. The only thing is the commission has no budget, so, in the town, so. I've been doing everything, well, we've been doing most of that, all that stuff right out of our own pocket. We can find something.
I would think at least getting some of that mulch that Brent was talking about that you got from another source might be useful in terms of.
The mulch from.
Well, that was grass clippings.
That was a grass clip, and that was graciously given to me by the Herrick Farm.
Normally, my recommendation would be to procure some bales of straw or bales of hay.
I could probably get some bales of hay or straw or something to put down and just cover the area.
Some old, almost waste hay, one would say.
Mm-hmm.
I have waste hay. I have to get it over there.
Which may well contain seeds. That would regenerate some of that.
Snow manure.
It's one of the reasons I use salt marsh hay in my gardening, but in this case it sounds like seeds would be welcome.
Yes. Well, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there wasn't any intention to start actually cultivating that
No,
area,
no, that
right?
was just a.
You were
we were
solely
cleaning it up.
getting some of those sediments that were
Yes.
there. And
The other
mixing
thing
it
was
in.
that it was all growing in with that all poison sumac, and it was starting to take over the garden area.
Right.
Yeah.
And that whole area was poison sumac, and I just pushed it back because
It was in the compost pile.
But there was, he's right in that we did go, there's a pile of luma, the stuff that was stripped off of the garden area about 30-something years ago by all it was Mr. Flofo doing the area, because I was there when it was happening, and that's always been a sore spot for me. So, and we did, when I made the compost pile, I used some of that dirt to put in the compost pile and worked at it, So yeah, I didn't realize that was over the line that much, or ever any. I didn't even realize that was that over. I just thought that was all part of it. But
Right. Well, it should be clearly stated, again, there were no boundary markers, there was nothing even within eyesight to give you a point of reference for you to know where.
But just
that
to
boundary was.
verify, when you and I and Barry first went down there, to the garden, you had put some stakes in saying, I think this is where things are going. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but that was for the plots.
Yes, I'm saying, so we really, even since the very beginning, that back lot line, we've never had.
Oh, right, there's
a
no, no,
basis for how far we could go.
right, and it doesn't appear that when the property was surveyed for the preparation of the subdivision plans, it doesn't appear that anything was monumented, but that being said, normally they just monument corners, and there are no
Yeah.
corners.
Even in the stone wall, we
Yeah.
couldn't find.
Yeah, but that,
Stone
again, that stone wall
buildings.
wasn't even on the plans originally,
No,
so.
because it's just something that they put in there after they leveled the property for the orchard.
Yeah.
That's where they stuck the stones. That's a good place. We'll put them there.
That's been, I know in my lifetime, it's been pushed back and forth a little bit too.
So mulching and reseeding, if we have the ability to get some grass seed, but I would definitely recommend the scattering of some hay mulch there on the bare soil.
That will be done.
And that would serve as taking care of the issue of the bare soils.
3 or 4 bales.
Is it, we're talking about number 2 or?
Number 2.
Soil disturbance, where do we stand on that again?
Well, again, these used grass clippings to stabilize the down gradient edge, which was the most, where the most risk of erosion and sediment transport was likely to occur in a rainstorm. So that's been taken care of, and I believe Dave has the pictures in front of him.
Okay.
Because of the bright sun, it doesn't really show the grass clippings too well, except they're kind of washed out there.
Yeah, I can see them, yes. Well, that leaves us with number 3, and I guess my own personal recommendation would be, and I can't speak for the rest of the commission, is that a very brief letter to the chairman of the Parks and Recreation Department or committee, as the case may be, indicating that there's a possibility of spillover onto their property, and they may wish to investigate it. To suffice.
Well, the selectmen were copied on this because I was told that the selectmen have the ultimate custodial responsibility for that parcel.
Well, that's okay, but
Well-
you can copy them both on it, but I'd make a very brief, my recommendation would be to make a very,
Well, they were copied on the notice of violation.
oh, so they're already aware of it.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
So, otherwise it's out of our jurisdiction, so I think we can
Correct.
cover that.
So if I may, in regards to number 1, is there a request from the Community Gardening Committee to expand where the compost pile currently is located?
We would like to, yes.
Okay, how much of that area do you need? Just to the outer edge of that pile?
Right about, well, the problem is our compost pile, like the gentleman that was here earlier said, it kind of has a tendency to spread. So we were pushing it back because I could not find the email that you had sent me with the thing about the hoses, the metal cages and stuff that needed to be cleaned
A
up.
hose
It
in a
was-
chair.
And it was back in last September, October, of course it went away. But it also said something about the compost pile infringing on that area, the walk area by the garden, so we were trying to compost everything or bring it back together and consolidate
Right.
it.
Well, let me.
And that's how we got into this moving things around and not
Right.
realizing what we had done.
Well, being the author of that email, let me refresh your memory. And it was solely to point out that you had an approximate 20-foot wide
Mm-hmm.
corridor or access
Right.
way going around the end of those plots. And at the time I authored that, your compost pile, a very dark, black, rich-looking compost, had an approximate diameter of 20 feet, blocking that access way. And I think I solely pointed out, I didn't necessarily tell you what to do with your compost. I think I solely pointed out the fact that your compost pile was basically blocking
Right.
what was supposed to be your access way around that end, because if you remember correctly, you had made a comment to the commission when you sought permission for the pergola to be constructed.
Yeah.
You had sought permission for an opening to be made in the stone wall, and the commission had actually granted you
Yes.
permission to open the stone wall
Yeah,
down on that
right.
end, thinking that you would then have a perimeter access way to go
Yeah.
around the whole circumference of the plots. So you,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, we-
still have that
Yeah.
de facto approval,
Right.
and so the statement about the compost pile that I made was a totally innocent statement, thinking
Well,
that it was blocking
We,
where
well,
you would
well,
be setting up your route to go around.
The way it was though is it was infringing because it was just sliding over. People would take some out and of course, or they'd bring in stuff after the gardens were being closed down for the fall,
Right.
and they would throw it into the pile, and then we'd mix it. And of course, the piles got wider and wider, so.
And people started making new piles.
Yes, then people started making new piles.
So,
It was too far to walk.
so as a possible solution to this, would be the suggestion, that we try and facilitate possibly putting 2 posts, towards the property boundary, so I'll use the term on the back side of the existing compost pile. I believe that gives you plenty of room to turn it and move it around between the end of the garden plots and where it currently is situated.
Mhm.
So if we possibly put in a couple of posts to try and just give you folks some guidance as to that's the limit. And that should keep activity away from the property boundary and is a possible solution to solving the problem of this inadvertent excursion onto the Parks and Recs parcel, which again, obviously wasn't anything that was premeditated or could even be known about, because it hadn't been taped off or marked to my knowledge. So does that sound amenable, and the commission be in agreement with that?
The only thing I'm gonna check with you is where you want the post, that's all I want you to.
Well, I know, yeah, we'll have to work on that,
We-
as well as see if we can come up with a couple of posts,
we-
since you don't have funding.
These posts have notice of
Are you-
what the posts mean?
Well, of course, the only signage we have are the no cut, no disturb signage.
Right.
So that should, if that faces the garden area, that would actually probably solve things. And we could just let that area just revegetate behind there towards the property
Are
boundary.
we talking cement bounds
No,
as
no,
survey
no.
bounds?
No, we're
No.
talking some 4x4 posts,
Just some 4x4
like we,
posts?
like we utilize to protect the boundary edges of wetland resource areas with a
Okay,
with
no,
a
I'm
no cut,
just
no disturb.
making sure, because that means somebody would have to come in and survey it to set those poles. Those stone bounds have to be set with a survey crew.
Right, so can I just,
No, I'm just,
Can I
I'm
just say
making
that-
sure.
that's a lovely idea, if you wish to find
No.
the funding to implement that, we'd be grateful to accept that as a gift, but I'm only suggesting some 4x4 posts that we can use a post hole digger and just
Yep,
set in the ground and put a couple of our no cut, no disturb signs on them, and I think that would solve it would create at least some kind of landmark there that one could keep one's activities to the garden side of it. Seems like a low-cost solution to the issue.
Everybody comfortable with that in the commission?
Yes.
Any comments, thoughts from the audience?
That's acceptable.
All right, do you need a motion of any kind?
I think just to confirm that as a directive to me to work with the community garden folks to get the posts out there and see if we can somehow get the area reseeded.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Hearing none? Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
thank you very much.
You're seeing Friday, I'll see January.
Thanks. And Barry, I'll be in touch.
Okay, I'll stop by too,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have 4x4 posts or something, or do I need to go buy
Well,
some 4x4
sometimes I
posts?
do.
Sometimes you do. All right, well, we'll work on it, we'll figure out something. We have to buy them, we'll buy them.
Thanks.
I'd love to work
Where's the, compost going?
Yeah, well, see, the interesting thing is this is the new compost pile.
That's what I was
And
wondering.
that's where it
That's
used
the
to be.
old one.
And that's, and it was bigger than that. It was kind of blocking you. They couldn't even get their little garden carts around it. That's the only reason why I made a comment.
So
And this area,
is this.
and this area had been field
The
grass.
whole thing is.
This area, so you can see from this aerial photo, this was,
Right.
yes, a lot of bittersweet and sumac and just kind of overgrown. There's some multiflora rose in there to make it interesting. But that ended up being stripped off roughly. And again, this isn't exactly accurately scaled, but this is just giving you an idea. Now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Buckless has been patiently sitting here this evening for his certificate of compliance. And I think Charlie actually is the.
I guess I'm unrecused now.
Pardon?
I guess I'm unrecused now.
Yes.
Consider yourself unrecused.
Welcome back.
Okay. You're Mr. Buckless?
Yes, I am.
You've been here the whole meeting?
Yep. Well, there's a couple of other things I was interested in hearing about too.
Well, I hope you found this interesting. It can took in a wide array of kind of what we do, and we are going to be looking in the near future for a new commission member. If you're so interested, you might want to chat further with Brent about it.
Okay.
Let me push it.
A man can sit through all of that.
Yeah.
You're halfway there.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, this is kind of a little grouping here, and it'll make sense as I explain things. So this is the 9:30 PM agenda item, new certificate of compliance request 63-0071 and 63-0127 for 325 Weathersfield Street. Well, I'm not sure if it's your legal counsel or a legal counsel involved in your refinancing.
Right. for the-
Contacted me because apparently they did a title search and they found that order of conditions number 127 had been recorded, but it had never been closed out. So, not trying to confuse things, let me just go back to the beginning to just try and explain what the paperwork appears to have indicated. Paperwork indicates that at some point in time, things got wet in the office. So, but this is from Order of Conditions 71, 6371, which was issued on May 18th, 1987, to Andy Graffio. And apparently, nothing was done with this order. It was allowed to expire. So, my first request to the commission, if you so choose, would be to vote to issue a certificate of compliance for 63-0071 and declare that it's an invalid order of conditions. The work regulated was never commenced, and the order of conditions has lapsed and is no longer valid. This order number 71, as far as I can tell, wasn't recorded. But since I've got a record of it existing in the office, and sometimes things are spotty. I thought it best, especially since Mr. Buckless was seeking refinancing, that if we could issue a certificate of compliance closing out this earlier one, if by some manner it ever comes to light or whatever, there would be, at least in our records and now in the property owner's possession, there would be something showing that it's closed out. If the commission so chooses to do that this evening, I would make a recommendation to declare 63-0071 invalid.
Any comments by the commissioner?
Invalid because no work was done.
Correct. It was allowed to expire.
All right, you want a certificate of compliance for an invalid?
No, you're going to declare, by the issuance of a certificate of compliance, you're going to declare that 63-71 is invalid.
Okay, do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, that's done.
Excuse me.
That'll make the lawyers happy.
Well, it actually may not make anybody happy, but it's just one of those things, since I found it, and since we've got a property owner
Makes sense.
where we found an active one,
Get rid of
I'd rather have something in our file and something in your possession in case it ever,
Right.
in case it just was recorded and I don't know about it. I mean, I don't think so.
He said he couldn't find anything on it.
Right, so, again, this is just, while I was pulling the files and found this, I just feel better about taking care of it instead of letting it go back into the drawer and get wet, even wetter.
Yeah.
Might not even be able to read it at all.
I'm not sure I was on the commission then, but Judy may have been.
Is that one?
Excuse me.
You remember that one?
I remember Andy Graffio.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there's that. Okay, now moving on to the order that actually precipitated everything.
Michael Lane, this is a name I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Sat in the back of his Jeep that was bigger than the roof of it.
So apparently what happened is in 1992, March 7th, 1992, a new notice of intent application was submitted to the commission, whereupon DEP file number 63-127 was issued on April 18th, 1992. And it turns out that was exactly the same filing as 71 had covered. It's the construction of a single-family residence with a substantial portion of the dwelling being within the 100-foot buffer zone. And then there's a cross-country transmission line or septic field pipe that goes to a field that's located, for all intents and purposes, behind the new winery in that general area. And it crosses through bordering vegetated wetlands, makes a sort of, I don't know if that's a 35-degree angle bend or whatever. It's not a 45, but it may be.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, it goes out to the field. So it turns out that when this order was issued, there weren't any specific requirements about certificate of compliance requests. There is no requirement that engineered as-built plans be provided or the statement of an engineer. In fact, the conditions were rather slim, mainly just requiring erosion control to be put in place. So in talking to Mr. Buckless, He's been diligent in mowing the corridor that this line goes through, and he's also maintained where the cleanouts are located, and has marked those with short sections of pipe. And so actually it was very easy for me to perform an inspection and see where this was located, as well as in a couple of places, they apparently didn't backfill the trench very well, and there's actually a depression, so you can actually see the line that the trench follows. So before you tonight is a request, because this order was recorded at the registry and did recently turn up in a title search, although you stated you've financed a couple of times before that or
Yeah,
something?
2 or
and-
3 times before no one caught it.
and it hadn't come up before. But I've performed an inspection and can definitely tell you that there is a single-family residence built on property, and it does, I can see the manhole covers for, what is it, the septic tank and the pump chamber. And I can also see the markings for the cleanouts on the cross-country pipeline that goes out to the field, and I can see the air vent or snorkel for the field. It's all fully vegetated. If anything, probably doesn't want me to say this, if anything, I think the wetlands have advanced there. Actually are a little bit more expansive through the corridor, forested corridor area than they were originally when this was delineated, but that's probably to be expected from something from 1992. Now, the only issue here, though, is, so the commission was never asked for a certificate of compliance, but it turns out the Board of Health was never asked for a certificate of compliance either. But they do have a record that it was installed, and that's actually where I got the much cleaner copy of the plans that you're looking at, since the copy in our files apparently suffered some rainwater. But as near as I can attest to the commission, it appears that the few requirements that were imposed have been met on the site, and it's fully stabilized, and you're able to flush, so I assume everything's working as it should be.
Is this the house next to the stable property?
Yeah, I'm right next to them, and then Sullivan's on the other side, and their house is set way back.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm right next to the stables.
all right.
So the request is for the issuance of a complete certificate of compliance, and there were no ongoing conditions imposed by the commission back in 1992.
Any questions, comments, observations? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Right.
Opposed? None? Done.
I need to fill those things out further, and then I'll either call you or just pop them in the mail to you, whichever is
Pop in mail's fine,
convenient. Okay.
sure. It's great.
So you will need to record that one,
Okay,
so that it shows up in the registry,
okay.
so that any future title searches, and probably whoever that counsel is, will want to know that it's been recorded also.
Right. Right.
So you're all set?
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Never would've recognized him as one of my neighbors. But it's-
Yeah, it's been that way in my neighborhood too.
Is this the end of business?
I think we got you right on time, so.
I'm going to leave.
Yeah,
Yep.
if the rest of the commissioners want to discuss a little bit the regulatory changes, or
Sure. Safe trip.
Thank you. It's just forgetting. And Brent, thank you for the update of what happened in the previous meeting.
sure.
Yeah, coming back the same day.
No, my wife yelled at me, so I'll stay out there overnight. Now everybody's waiting for me to go as fast as I can.
Safe trip.
Thanks.
Yep.
Take care, everyone.
You too, thank you.
See you in 3 weeks.
Good night, Sam. You want to talk about this, Mac's comments on regulation changes, and I have not had a chance to read this memorandum, and I know the deadline is 30th.
Well,
for submitting comments.
Yeah, well, actually, I didn't necessarily want to focus on MACC's comments. I just wanted you folks to see some of the things that they had highlighted and expressed concern about. What I wanted to just mention to you is two major areas, but the more I have read and studied these things for the last 2 weeks, the more I have seen that concerns me. But the long and the short of it is that within what has previously been described as minor activities, and minor activities, basically construction of uses that are commonly associated with single-family residences, sheds, pools, patios. If those activities, and usually can include decks too, decks, sheds, pools and patios, those activities, if they are 50 feet or more away from the edge of bordering vegetated wetlands, or 50 feet or more away from mean annual high water in a riverfront area, have been allowed to occur without the filing of a request to determine applicability or a notice of intent, as long as appropriate erosion control has been used. Now, DEP is proposing a major, I'll try not to use my personal qualifying adjectives for this. They are proposing to allow additions of single-family residences, not larger than constituting 50% of the existing house footprint. Replacement of basement bulkhead, all right, well, that's not an issue. Installation of a ramp for compliance with accessibility requirements, so that's a handicap ramp, well, that's not a big deal. And percolation tests. Soil evaluations. Now that's under the temporary nature type thing, so maybe I should drop back and go back. Let's go back to the uses accessory to a single-family residence. I as a commissioner and as an agent have grave concern about allowing the construction of an addition that the sole criteria is whether an untrained individual has figured out that it's 50 feet away from BVW or mean annual high water, and that somehow 50% of the existing structure is an environmentally sensitive criteria for an activity that therefore isn't regulated, that isn't subject to regulation. So there's no review of that. What that means is that someone would go down to the building inspector's office. Let's say the gentleman who was just in here, Mr. Buckles. Now, Mr. Buckles' house, almost all of it is within the 100-foot buffer zone. So, on the part of his house that's over 50 feet away, and he has an approximate 30 by, it seems to have been added on to, so let's say it's 30 by 50. So he could build an addition 15 by 50. He wouldn't, and it wouldn't be reviewed. We'd never be able to look at where the proposed excavation is. We wouldn't be able to, he's assumed to use appropriate erosion control, but it's not, there's no requirement that we even have the ability to check on it.
But this addition would have to be still greater than 50 feet from the BBW.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
Now, this is a gentleman whose property has not been surveyed for wetlands delineation since 1992. And I can tell you right now that I would have to do a lot of augering out there to delineate the wetlands around his property. It's not something, you know, you have to, the thing that concerns me about this is a prescription in the regulations that would fit all 351 cities and towns. This is a prescription that makes no mention about stormwater, and yet stormwater is the big thing, that it's something that this commission has been very sensitive about. Before we even got involved with the stormwater bylaw, we looked that anyone proposing an impervious surface to it, be an addition or be it a driveway or something else like that, we look for infiltration of stormwater. There's no requirement in here, infiltration of stormwater. The biggest concern I have is the fact that it's prescriptive and there's no local control. Our resource areas here in Raleigh are of a whole, forget the coastal, our freshwater resources. Since I
And they
work
don't
in
fit
both,
that template.
since I work in both communities, I know that there's areas in Haverhill that can be a problem delineating, but I know for certain there's lots of areas here in Raleigh that are very problematic in trying to figure out how is a property owner going to know where to measure the 50 feet from. And what does it matter, because no one checks this.
Right.
This means they would march down to my office
They don't even know. They
and I
have
would,
to measure.
I would sign off on the building,
Right. You'd hit.
the building permit, and I have no ability
That'd be it.
to have them
Yeah.
submit any plans to us or anything else. Now they do go into, there's quite a long section in here about how they have to use, basically, if you're familiar with an order of conditions, before the special conditions that we attach to the order, there's a section called general conditions at the end of the document. I think they now number about 19, 18 or 19
Those are standard
general,
conditions.
standard conditions that are on every single form issued by DEP. And in one sense, they're very common sense conditions and they make sense in almost all situations. They're the ones that require recording, the ones that require the sign to be put up. They say that all fill should be clean fill. They say that the commission staff and its agent have the ability, as well as DEP personnel, to enter and inspect the property. I mean, they are common sense general conditions, but they move into the erosion control arena now. They move into, but this thing about 50% expansion of an addition scares the heck out of me, because it's not dedicated on any aspects of the site. It makes no mention about steep slopes.
Oh, yeah.
So this is totally based on an existing dwelling. And you don't know if that dwelling was, when it was built, if it was sited in an environmentally sensitive manner,
Yeah.
or if it's like a lot of lots here in Raleigh. It's wherever the fill ended, and they went back a little bit and they put a house there, on what was historically filled wetlands. So this really concerns me. I think this is a very ill-conceived change in the regulations, because I think the ramifications on it could be very detrimental to environmental protection.
Our Wetlands Protection Act, our local act wouldn't pick up some of this slack?
Well, the problem is, well, actually, technically, the problem is right now that our bylaw, when it talks about minor activities, I think actually cites a different, an earlier version of the regulations. And yeah, the problem would be that our bylaw wouldn't pick this up at all, because our bylaw says if it's a minor activity, then it follows the Wetlands Protection Act.
Does it say that, or does it say that earlier version, period, which means would still be in effect?
Well, it mentioned minor activities.
And this is
I mean,
considered-
usually when something uses the qualifying category, even if it doesn't have the section and the line number exactly correct, you know what it's talking about, because it is a definitive section of the 310 CMR 10.00, and so, you know, when somebody says the minor activities section to you, they don't usually cite the chapter and verse and the line number unless they're actually doing a legal citation, so.
It will.
So effectively, this throws the door open on what could be substantial additions, and the problem is that there's no regulation of it, there's no inspection, there's no verification, there's no,
Yeah, all the triggers are gone,
yeah, and the inspection is gone.
right, well,
I
triggers
mean,
that make that, yeah.
And right off the bat, I can tell you that, you know, even some professionals have a little issue with putting erosion control in and maintaining it, and,
seen that kind of thing.
so it kind of throws it throws the door open to the development community, and yet it doesn't seem to anticipate that there could be detrimental impacts to the resource areas in different communities.
One difference that I think I see is that our Wetland Protection Act would govern with regard to vernal pools, because it's gotta be 100 feet rather than the 50 feet they specify in there.
Well, actually, they don't. Well, that's another thing. They actually don't say anything about vernal pools in here.
Right, but I.
They just say 50 feet from BVW.
Right, but that can't trump our Wetlands Protection Act, our bylaw.
Well, that's the other thing. The way some of this stuff is written is probably going to provide direct conflicts between bylaws and ordinances and what the state law has, especially, again.
So to be open to interpretation, that's,
Well,
Court decision.
there's no checks and
Yeah.
balances.
yeah,
The phrase trust but verify, there's
Yeah.
absolutely no trust and there's no verification in this. This would allow totally unregulated construction activity in the buffer zone. And remember, our bylaw says the buffer zone is a resource area, not just a regulated area as it is under the state. And because there's no verification, no delineation, how do you know what they've measured the 50 feet from? When did they measure it?
One thing you might suggest in your letter is that rather than make these changes to the Wetlands Protection Act, that they follow these guidelines for their own internal review of individual Conservation Commission decisions, and leave the important enforcement and oversight
to the
to
local.
the local conservation committees. It just means that they wouldn't review them on appeal, and they wouldn't force the change, and we would be able to maintain all those things.
Well, I'm going to say, you either have local control or you don't have local control. And I think, I would advocate for stating a position that we're opposed to this criteria for additions being put into the minor activities category.
Well, I agree with that, but I'd go one step further and say that if they insist on that, that rather than impose it on the Conservation Commission, say they considered internal guidelines for their own review, which would mean that it would meet their budget problem situation, but wouldn't impose, it would keep your enforcement more honest and true and pure than by doing that.
Well, DEP's been under budgetary and staffing constraints. The interesting thing about this, though, is that this doesn't seem to have anything to do with agency staff time, because the agency, as far as I know, doesn't put much staff time into requests to determine applicability. They don't even issue comments on them. We just send them in and copy them on it, and only if they're appealed.
And that doesn't happen very often.
And that doesn't happen too often because, well, in our experience, it doesn't. Now, I can't tell you what goes on in other communities. There's another 350 cities and towns, and,
Right.
and who knows. But I think the core thought of that construction activity of a substantial nature, which additions, and then the criteria to those additions be 50% of what the existing structure is, has absolutely nothing to do with wetlands protection. And it cuts out local control and local review, and therefore, it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't meet the criteria of protecting environmentally sensitive areas. I mean, because I've seen some additions that were substantial, and the houses they were attached to were already substantial. So, but my main issue is that there's no verification, there's no review process. And I think that is definitely, would cause more enforcement actions ultimately, but also it's gonna damage a bunch of resource areas, especially where they haven't even thought about things like infiltrating,
Well,
impervious surfaces.
Yeah, at a minimum, they should at least allow it to be able to, for the local enforcement, to be able to use what's specific to their community, to their.
Their bylaws.
Yeah, well, their bylaws, but also their environment.
Yeah.
I mean, being where we are, you're absolutely right, as opposed to someplace that's flat and dry. I mean.
Or I'd state the converse too. Now, there's some areas in Raleigh, there's a lot of resource areas in Haverhill that are very easy to delineate based on topography. But that has the dual edge.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, so yeah, you can measure the 50 feet, but if you already got a slope in there, which you can have a relatively severe eroded slope. I've got an incised stream behind my house that easily has got a 16-foot drop on some of the banks on it. Now, if I wanted to build a 50% of an addition to my house, according to this, I could just go right straight towards the stream with it, even though I've got some other directions on my lot that would be a lot more.
Right up to it, yeah.
A lot less sensitive or whatever. And I won't have to even infiltrate my stormwater or even worry about that. I can just let it drop. So it doesn't make sense. So that's one of the things that concern me. There's another thing that occurs in here, which is they've created something they call General Order of Conditions. And they name it, but it's not specifically described as near as I can tell, but let me tell you what I think it is. They've put a whole section in here about ecological restoration projects, and they've put dam removal under that. Now, this whole new section that they've created, they've made the statement that they presume an ecological restoration project is beneficial.
Right. I agree with you.
And then, with no review from the local authority, they then establish what they call eligibility criteria. And I think again, because they don't describe it very well, but I believe what they are doing is they're setting the stage for a project that meets their eligibility criteria, if it's called an ecological restoration project, it would get automatic approval.
Yeah.
Automatic issuance of what's called a general order of conditions.
See the fingerprints of a former conservation agent in this town behind that.
Well, but there's a problem here, and that is that as we have seen with the dam removal that occurred down on, in the Fenno property there, the old Fenno estate, you have pluses and minuses. Whenever you do a dam removal, you may restore some resource areas, but you also degrade or diminish existing resource areas that were already there and had established themselves. And so our associates down in Ipswich, they've allowed me to review their comments they're submitting, and they make the great point that there's nothing that demonstrates that all ecological restoration projects are beneficial, end of sentence. And it really should be up to the local authority to have public input and to have a review where both the negatives and the positives are discussed. And then, if the project meets the criteria that the commission be allowed to issue, they actually have said in their proposed regulations with that eligibility criteria that the commission shall issue an order, not may. No, not may. It should be discretionary. That's why a commission is called a local permit granting authority, not the local rubber stamp authority.
Right.
I agree with those comments, Brent, and it's an important point. If I may, I'd like you to add in one additional thought
Sure.
into all that, and I think I've raised this before, is that all of the recent articles that have appeared and concerns about nitrogen runoff from land into these kinds of areas specifically, and release from impounded ponds, very likely is something that needs to be taken into account, and one of the criteria with regard to consideration of whether these dams should be removed or not. And nobody's addressing that issue as far as I can see.
Right, and that was even talked about in the presentation seminar I went to that was sponsored by the Ipswich Watershed Association. They actually had one of the researchers talking about a study where they had seen, they were talking about beaver impoundments. And beaver impoundments actually help facilitate a reduction in nitrogen being transported by the water. And it apparently has to do with the fact that those impoundments have a lot of biologic activity, a lot of plant life, a lot of animal life. And so all those hungry little things are all looking for nitrogen to incorporate into their roots, their stems, or their body mass, or whatever. And so the fact that the water carrying nitrogen comes into those ponds and then has all those hungry mouths or hungry root systems to feed, that apparently results in a fairly demonstrable reduction, anywhere up to 20% sometimes, of nitrogen in the water. And that's, that's not an insignificant amount. So that's a great point. So, but my concern is this kind of, this desire in these regulations to go to these kind of, what I would call a presumptive approval with no local review. It's like, well, what's the local Concom supposed to do? You should be figuring out whether the activity is actually protective of wetland resource areas, and whether the net result at the end of the day is actually environmentally plus and of a benefit to the local community, or rather, because we've actually seen one of our neighboring communities has actually turned down having a dam removed.
Was that Newbury?
I think it was Newbury, yeah. Now, I don't know what the issue was, but local control should mean that you should have the ability to review the type thing. And the final thing I'll mention, and there's a bunch of other stuff in here. It gets very detailed and stuff, but there's another category that I get very concerned about, and it's innovative technologies, i.e. renewable energy.
Oh, yeah.
And under that category, they've put in about testing innovative technologies. Now, the first thing is, I think they blow the definition of innovative technologies, because what they're really looking at and focusing on is water-dependent renewable energy generation, i.e. the possibility of maybe submerged turbines that harness tides, or maybe, some other type of system that harnesses water flow or something like that. But they then throw the words "but not limited to" in the definition of innovative technology. So basically, they start to tell you what it is and that it's water-dependent type thing. But then they say it's not limited to that, so it could be anything.
So they could swing in these huge solar farms.
It could swing in solar farms, but it could also,
Wind power.
it could swing in, it could
Could be wind turbines.
wind turbines, or it could be a piling mounted incinerator erected in the salt marsh over here that you barge waste to. Because it makes no mention that the innovative technology it doesn't tell you what a renewable energy thing is. And I can tell you right now that all the companies that deal with trash want trash to be declared a renewable resource, because people always generate it.
Right.
And therefore they say it's renewable. But the other thing they don't mention is that the innovative technologies be low emission or no emission. Again, it doesn't qualify that. And so you could get into all sorts of Rube Goldberg things. But it also doesn't require any verification or substantiation by the commission that this innovative technology is the real deal. They don't even require engineered existing condition plans. They just have to come in with a lab certified diagram of what the device is.
Mhm.
They don't even have to tell you
Where it's
what
going.
or how much of what resource it's impacting, like land underwater or bank or whatever. They don't have to give you an existing conditions plan stamped by an engineer. That's not required. So it's this lack of verification and lack of local review.
Lack of
that-
specification as to what additional types
Yeah. But here
of
again,
technology.
I mean, let's face it, if somebody came in here to us and they wanted to do anything in a water course or anything else like that, don't you think at a bare minimum, we'd want to know what the impact was to the resource areas,
Well,
even if it's a temporary
That's our
impact?
due diligence to find out what that is.
Yeah, and so, again, our commission to the south, one of their suggestions was not only the fact that the definitions seemed to be way too broad and expansive, but also that the local review needed to be much more detailed, and that there should be bonding, because there's a time limit. The regulations give a time limit to how long this innovative technology can be tried out.
Mhm.
But there's nothing that says that then they have to restore the area. But of course, since you don't get an existing conditions plan, you don't know what the area would
What
have to
do
be
you
restored
restore
to. So those are just a couple of the things I wanted to highlight, because I don't wanna keep the meeting still going and going. But those are the things that jumped right out at me that I intend to comment, and I just wanted to feel out the commission.
Quite a Pandora's box.
It is.
Oh, yeah. But I look forward to reading your comments after you've made them, since the time is limited here for you to do that. Can we go back to something that came up during the meeting, and that is the people that didn't show up with regard to the Coughlin project?
Oh, the coastal landscaping.
Landscaper.
Yes. Carl,
check and see if it's one of our cars.
It's not my car, it's mine, somebody else there.
Okay, let's go.
Be someone down the street.
Sounds like it's back there. Is that open for?
Can't you?
Breaking into something.
Definitely a car in the house.
Nice and cool up there.
Must be cool today. Nice today though.
Rain tonight?
Hot,
Rain?
hot Thursday and Friday.
More frickin' rain. Oops, excuse me.
Talking about rain tomorrow too.
I normally don't mind rain, but
I don't like dealing with it. It's welcome to me as long as
Oh, I'll have
I
to get a flashlight on, somebody was trying to break into my car. Set the alarm off, I guess.
really.
I don't see any signs that anybody's doing anything to it, but that was my alarm. I'm sorry. Interruption.
Coastal landscapes.
Yeah, I sent them the enforcement order. And had a phone call, I think it was last week. On it. So they were cited for the same, same thing that Mr. Coughlin was cited for, since they were the ones that was actually doing the removal of the vegetation in those restricted areas.
yeah, we decided we wanted to do that. And then they just ignore it,
So they,
potentially.
you said somebody did get in touch with you?
Yeah, I don't see my note right off. Yeah, I was called, and I explained and told them what time, they were on the docket, and I got an email from them, verified the address. Well, he called me because he received it, so it's post office box.
Maybe he interpreted the continuance as
Yeah.
a free pass, not to show.
Well, I specifically said that the commission wanted him to come in and wanted to speak to him about, since they
Whether it was
performed
continued or
an
not.
activity.
But it was continued, but you wanted still.
Well, it's just on the agenda as being continued.
Yeah, he didn't know. He had no idea that it was continued. All he knew was what you
Right.
said.
But I sent him an enforcement order that specifically directed that he attend our meeting of May 28th and submit a letter stating the intent to comply with the enforcement order. Attend Concom meeting and submit letter stating intent to comply by May 28th.
So you didn't get a letter?
That's all?
You didn't get a
I
letter?
have not gotten a letter, no.
And they didn't show?
That, it was an and, not or.
Right. Well,
It's hard to explain.
it could give him the benefit of the doubt, I suppose. Or,
Or we could get their attention more firmly
exactly.
by indicating that if they don't show up at the next meeting, that a fine of X dollars would be applied.
That's exactly where I was headed.
already got enough reason to fine them right now.
Yep. So,
Called to confirm, so we know we got the communication, and I told them specifically that you folks wanted to have a conversation with him about the cutting and the clearing.
Yep.
He didn't say, no, we didn't do it or anything.
Right.
Didn't get any of that.
I'd fine 'em. These are the people that I
These are
have
the people that
problems with.
walked by the
Yeah,
no cut, no disturbance area and hacked down alders right on the edge
right.
of an emergent wetland inundated with water.
And they're people that should know this stuff because they do this stuff all the time.
Well, they're landscapers.
Exactly.
My
They should
patience
know the
for
plants.
landscapers is limited.
Or arborist or anything that deals with this stuff. They deal with this.
But they deal badly with it,
They ignore it,
right?
or seemingly so.
Because a lot of what they do, once it's done, oh,
Yeah.
I can't put that tree back.
And they know that.
Well, it's possible that there was some sort of emergency circumstance that cropped up today that
Okay.
didn't permit the person to get in here or to give notice that they weren't coming, but I'd be inclined to indicate that a fine of X dollars will be enforced or would be voted upon at the next meeting, or would be, a fine will be applied.
So there's no reason why we should call them and say, what up?
Well, no, and I guess the reason, since we got, since you folks have Mr. Coughlin basically doing whatever needs to be done to restore the area, come back into compliance,
Is he having?
I mean, at this point in time, I'm not really sure what, I mean, before, Mr. Coughlin was trying to get Coastal to actually contribute and do some of the stuff, but we said right off the bat that we wanted a qualified scientist to do the restoration, which they didn't have, and I also think the surveying and doing the plans and stuff that Meridian is doing right now is beyond their capabilities and skill set.
Yeah, but if they choose not to contact us, we'll have to contact.
But they've already done that.
Yeah.
Right, but I
But they
mean,
haven't
about
appeared.
why they're not here.
Well, at the end of the day, I guess it depends on what the commission's goal is. If the commission's goal is to restore and get that property and that property owner back into compliance with the various restrictions and stuff that are on that property. I mean, we know Coastal did the work. You probably technically could have just issued a fine right off. You could have told me to issue a fine right off to
Right.
Coastal. Coastal coming in
They're
here.
kinda out of it now.
Coastal coming in here isn't necessarily, again, I don't wanna, I'm just saying, just for clarification purposes, we seem to be moving towards what we would want accomplished anyway without the
Mhm.
participation or the input of Coastal Landscape. And if you just want to use that to inform your decision that the next time we get an issue with Coastal Landscape, to just fine them right off the bat instead of.
I think it's important that they appear before us, and
I do
I
too.
agree that the necessary steps that need to be taken have been and are being taken, but I think that they shouldn't be allowed to skate free on this and, without being held to a discussion before us as to our serious concerns about this and how, a fine could be applicable, but I think we ought to indicate that if they don't show, a fine of X dollars will be applied.
I agree. They
Which,
can't
Probably
just
the best way to approach it. yeah.
blow the whole thing off.
so the question would remain, if everyone's in agreement on that, as to how much of a fine we should propose for getting their attention here.
Well, we can discuss what the fine will be
It could
if we
be,
get to that point, and if they don't show
it
again.
could be quite lofty based on the
They
fine
asked to come in,
schedules.
they agreed to come in, they did not, so they need to come in.
Yeah, so the fine becomes automatically in effect if they don't show at the next meeting or a representative.
I'm good with that.
So we need a minimum attention getting fined.
We can do that, right?
I mean, ultimately, this kind of falls back to, you know,
You've got four violations right off the bat. You've got, altering the buffer zone, altering of BBW, altering of a previously restricted area, and then altering of conservation restricted plant community. So right off the bat, you got four, so that's what, 75, what is it, 150,
yeah.
300, and then another 300, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is the schedule.
So there's almost 600, almost
$600.
$800,
Yeah, 600 plus. anyway.
825 or something like that, right off the bat, for just one day.
Right.
Right, let's indicate that.
I'm sorry?
That would be my recommendation.
That's what I was
That
trying
we,
to suggest,
you know,
just as something,
Give them a
For
free.
each of those, and that will automatically go into effect in the absence of their appearance at the next meeting. The reason cited for one day and that further absences would
That should get it.
lead the commission to consider
I hope
additional.
so.
Well, yeah, if they don't show the second time, that would, day two. You know?
well,
I just don't think
now,
half of these
just remember though,
companies come with any recommendations or qualifications.
Hmm.
They just.
I mean, without my having a lot of time to think about this,
You could be right.
Put a sign on it.
I'm not sure we get very far if they choose not to, I mean, if they choose to just ignore that, I'm not sure there's any further that we could take this.
Okay. Why?
Because the property owner, who has, again, Commonwealth of Massachusetts says that the property owner has ultimate responsibility
Yeah.
for
He's
environmental
doing this
violations,
now.
and he's proceeding to, you know, comply. So I'm just saying, I don't think there would be any hope of actually being able to go to court
Well,
and get anywhere with this.
We don't know
this
how
is a
he's
fine
dealt
for
with
day
them
one,
either.
which was the day I first
They may
observed
be on his
activity.
payroll,
And
just,
it was the second day that you finally put the cease and desist on them.
Right.
So we do have grounds for going to a day two fine.
I
But
understand,
beyond
but
that-
what I'm saying is
I
if they
understand.
choose, as they've chosen to ignore
Right. if
our
they
enforcement
ignore this.
order and our request to attend tonight's hearing, if we get to the next meeting and we tell them that if they don't attend, we're gonna issue a fine,
There's
issuing
no
a fine
bite.
is under our control, we can do that. I'm just saying, if they then choose to ignore that, I'm not sure we have a credible case to pursue it to district court, which is our next step, and get a court magistrate to
Listen,
schedule a show cause hearing.
Well,
Because
we did that once.
Right, but
And-
that situation was totally different because it was the property owner, and the property owner had chosen not to take any steps or even to contact us. I'm just saying, this, we've got the problem with, or excuse me, we have what might be seen as an inconsistency, where this contractor had only a small piece or part to play in the violation, and the property owner has now gone beyond that contractor and is taking all the steps to actually bring the property back into compliance. I'm speculating here, and I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't be
Right, no.
doing it, I'm just
No.
saying, don't get your hopes up if they choose to ignore
right,
a letter that says we're gonna issue a fine
Mhm.
if they
right.
don't attend
If
the
they
next
ignore it
meeting.
and they ignore it again, there's really no
Well, we
bite,
can
but
deal with
they
that
don't know
issue.
that.
We can deal with that at the next meeting.
Exactly.
And
Right.
presumably Doug may have other perspectives on that.
Yeah, that's very true.
So,
Let's go with that.
Yeah,
Okay,
do I hear a motion to that effect?
so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? None? Okay.
I'm sorry, moved by
Me, Dave.
Dave,
Dave, seconded by?
I'll give it to Judy. It was a tie.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yes, just one quick thing, because I don't wanna keep us too much longer here. Trowbridge Circle, the large landscaping, clearing and filling that happened there. It has come to my attention that nothing further has been done. I have no record that any plantings have been done. I have no record that any of the actions called for in the directive accompanying the enforcement order under bylaw for restoration of the impacted buffer zone. I don't, no record that any of the planting's done, there's no monitoring reports or whatever. I would like permission to issue a notice of non-compliance and intent to fine. Because the directive said that if those things weren't done, I think actually gave them to July or August last year. Forget the plantings, yeah, we've gone past the fall planting period, and now we're into the spring planting period, and I've got no record that they've done anything out there. And they're supposed to restore the impacted buffer zone that they inadvertently cleared.
Who would be fined?
I think it's Daniel DiStefano.
So it's an individual property owner?
98 Trowbridge, yeah, he was the property owner, as far as I know he still is.
Okay.
They were here, the two of them, right? Husband and wife?
Yes, at some point, but that was getting almost a year ago now.
Right, yeah. I remember they were here.
It was a huge clearing and filling job just to them to
He
extend their
He actually had
backyard.
the equipment still out in the backyard, right?
Yeah, well, it turns out he and his brother have a landscaping firm, so, yeah, he's got a
Okay,
front end loader.
we assumed that that was the equipment.
Yeah, yeah. We actually had to issue a stormwater bylaw permit because their clearing exceeded 20,000 square feet. It was actually like 30,000 or something.
That's right.
Was the biggest landscaping backyard expansion that I've ever seen.
Now, where is that? Maybe-
Trowbridge Circle is,
That way.
After you go by the Demoulas entrance, I
On
can't
one
remember the,
thirty-three, it's on the right.
what's the name of that, Long Meadow
Long
Meadow
Meadow.
Drive?
Oh,
And
It
then
goes
it
to
It
Trowbridge.
goes off Long Meadow.
It's towards the, our
Yes.
boundary with Ipswich, and actually
Yes.
the Ipswich Country
Country
Club, I
Club is
think,
on the
is
other
on the other
side.
side, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that now.
So
Do it.
So I'd like permission to tell him that we're gonna fine him if he doesn't
I think
prove that he's done the
that's
stuff on the
definitely
directive.
appropriate,
Yes.
given it's been 10 months.
Well, and the directive said that these things needed to be done by a date certain, I always put that in there.
So you're looking for a motion to approve your,
Actually, you don't need to,
No
you don't
motion,
need,
just.
I don't need a
okay.
motion, cause you folks already
Go for it.
authorized me to issue the directive, so this is a
Okay.
clause that's in the directive.
so,
I just,
Go for it.
instead of,
Yep.
again, just in case he has done the stuff and just hasn't turned in any monitoring reports, I wanna just
Just
send him the
pin him.
notice and tell him
Yeah.
that, you know, we can,
to be on the record,
we
that's all.
can fine him, you know, this is what we said in that directive.
Okay,
So,
sounds good.
I'll let the record show that by consensus, the commission members agreed to, that you should proceed along those lines.
okay.
You ready for a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I believe so.
Do I hear one?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Done.